Alright, hey everyone. In this sort of short video, I just want to kind of talk about digital versus traditional. I always kind of see, as well as myself, is always kind of this wondering of which one is kind of better. And I don't think one is necessarily better than the other one, but I definitely have some like personal preferences for each of them. And when I was first getting into drawing, I actually wanted to do mostly digital stuff, and then kind of like slowly started to morph into practicing a lot of traditional. I started off with pencil and then getting into like a lot of inks. And I just really like traditional art, how it feels more, that it's like very hands on. I can do the art on a piece of paper with like ink, and the ink has like a consistency. You kind of get like a feeling with the brush. And then also when the drawing's done, you can kind of always just like have the sheet of paper there with your drawing on it. So you can kind of like look from time to time at the drawing. And digital is sort of a little bit different for me. I've kind of like getting back into digital now, and it's been like a little bit of getting used to, but the two definitely like cross over pretty well. Like you can definitely find, I would say like right now I could probably transfer like 60% of what I do into digital and then kind of crisscross in that way. But then there's a lot of like intricate things that are very different. Like digital feels very infinite, or at least like there's so many pixels on a page that you can do, and it kind of just like opens up almost too many options, I would say sometimes. So that makes it a little tricky to kind of create within like a limited space, which is actually one of the positives that I like about traditional, is that when I'm drawing a character, the brush can only go so thin on lines that it sort of is a good limiter to sort of like how much stuff can fit on the page in specific areas, and it really helps kind of make out a scene and sort of like measure. Whereas it's very difficult digital wise to sort of like kind of gauge like distance and things. But that kind of brings me into, I think, like really the between the two, digital and traditional, it kind of depends on like which of the two you're more familiar with. And I don't really think like one is better than the other. It's just kind of whichever one you're more familiar with, I think you'll probably prefer, or at least be more comfortable with. So you sort of like know the ins and outs. But I definitely think both are worth doing, or at least for me, I've kind of like sort of switched back and forth depending on like how bored I am of one, or if I need sort of a break from digital, then I'll go to traditional, and they really have like each of their own things. And yeah, digital, I like to do a lot more of a painter, sort of like what you're seeing right now. This is just kind of like a character doodle that I was randomly doing, kind of just getting used to drawing on a computer, as I usually prefer to do digital on an iPad, but just kind of like playing around. And usually I'll do more of a painting on digital, since I think one of like the key things that I like about digital is that you can do as many colors as you want. You don't need to like sift through a bunch of markers to try to find a color that works, or mix up colors. It's just kind of, you have the color wheel and can just go in through and pick whatever you want, which is kind of why I have my color wheel on the right side like so large, just because that's like a main thing that I'm kind of messing around with as I do digital stuff. But yeah, I love how rendered you can get digital. There's a bunch of different brushes, even though I usually just stick with one the whole way through, just to make it a little bit simpler. But yeah, a lot of the digital stuff that I do is kind of trying to emulate a bit of the traditional stuff, like the simplistic aspects. But I also have kind of learned to like accept each of the mediums as their own thing, and that they have a lot of like different possibilities and different pros and cons. So I've been like exploring more of them on like an individual level and kind of just seeing what each of them has to offer. But traditional art is I'd say it's not like too far behind for like production, I guess. Like making any sort of product like a book or wanting to make prints, it's a few extra steps of either scanning or taking photos, and that can be a little bit difficult to kind of get a good setup for. And so if you're looking to do prints or make like a art book or a comic book or something, traditional is a little bit more steps, but it's like my art collection book I did was all traditional stuff. So, and that was with taking photos to basically scan them in. But digital, basically everything is already scanned in. So that's definitely a huge perk. And also, things like animation are much easier in that way that everything's just kind of already ready to go to like prints or put on prints or products and that sort of thing. So I'd say that's one of the main perks of doing digital over traditional. But traditional just has like this vibe or feeling to it that I really enjoy. And sometimes it feels more meditative. And yeah, each of them just kind of have their own thing. Like digital, I love that I can kind of just get lost in rendering. And that's kind of a thing that I really value for like being entertaining and fun for digital. And then traditional, I just like to kind of like see how many things I can put on a page. And that's sort of like rendering in a way, but it's more of like a scene. And then my digital stuff, I usually like to do like more specifically like characters and kind of do more of a deep dive on their rendering. So yeah, just kind of my thoughts on traditional versus digital.